So we're finally going back to doing our top 5 PvE builds lists today, specifically going over the top 5 power stancing builds. Now, power stancing meaning that you have 2 weapons of the exact same weapon type in either hand to do a unique type of moveset. Now, all the gameplay throughout the video is going to be as level 150, but I am going to show you guys how to level up these builds as level 80 as well. As always, please do like and subscribe and let me know down in the comments what type of top 5 builds you would like to see next. And do follow me on Twitch because it should be live by the time this video is out. But yeah, that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, starting off the list at number 5, we are going to have a twin blade frost build. Now, this is going to involve using 2 gargoyles twin blades, but you can only get 1 per playthrough, so an alternative would be to use the twinned knight blades, which is just going to be very similar, another nice strength-based twin blade, but it's just not going to have as much damage, nor as good as a scaling with a cold infusion. As for our Ash of War options, we're going to have the Ice Spear in our main hand and Chilling Mist in the offhand. Our Chilling Mist is just going to add this more frost damage if you go up against a boss that's more resistant. And then we're going to have Ice Spear, which is a decent projectile option, does decent damage, go relatively far, and nice frost build up. But the main part of this build is just going to be able to spam jumping attacks because the Twin Blade Power Stance jumping attacks are amazing, have really good range, hit very, very fast. So we're going to utilize that by going with the Raptor Black Feathers chest piece and the Claw Talisman because they both do stack and both do improve the jumping attack damage. Now, as for our stats, at level 150, we're going to have the 60 Vigor and 60 Strength. It does say that I have 20 Dexterity, but it's actually only 15 because I am getting a +5 to Dexterity with the Millicent Prosthesis, which also does boost my damage over time with successive attacks, which the Twin Blade jumping attacks do that very, very well. I'm also going to have 25 Intelligence. The only reason I have 20 Intelligence is to actually wield Terra Magica, and obviously our weapons still scale a bit of Intelligence, so there is slight benefits there. But as for my level 80 build, I'm just going to have 40 Vigor and the rest of the points into Strength. Not going to really benefit off Intelligence with a lower level build because the Frost doesn't actually scale off Intelligence. You're just going to have a flat Frost build up, and you're only going to get a bit more damage when you do level up Intelligence, so there's not much of a benefit there. But as for the other talismans, you're going to have the Ritual Sword Talisman to just boost your damage at full health, and you're going to have the Shard of Alexander to boost the damage of Ice Spear, which I don't really use much, but it still is very beneficial. At number 4, we are going to have a Power Stance Curve Sword build. Now, Power Stance Curve Swords have some of the best movesets in the entire game, especially with those running and jumping attacks because they hit very quickly, plenty of times, which is obviously very nice. Now, the weapons themselves, we're going to have 2 Bandits Curve Swords, which does require a bit of farming, but it definitely is worth it. You probably could go with the Scavenger's Curve Swords instead if you did want a Bleed build because it'll still be just as good, but I'm already going to have a Bleed build appear later on this list, so it's not really worth it. So I'm just going to talk about the Bandits Curve Swords because the Bandits does actually have the most range and the most base damage out of all the other Curve Swords themselves. So it's still going to be a very top tier option. But we are going to have these Flame Art infused with Flaming Strike put onto them. Now, Flaming Strike is a very solid weapon skill because it does actually buff your weapon with 90 fiery damage for 40 seconds. And the attack itself is still very high damaging also. But as for the talismans, we're going to have the Millicent Prosthesis and the Wigged Sword Insignia, which actually does boost your damage with successive attacks. Now, you probably could put the Shard of Alexander on here instead, but I'm probably not going to be using the Ash of War to hit with it. I'm just going to be using it to buff. So I'm going to spam a bunch of running attacks. I'm going to have the Ritual Sword Talisman to boost your damage at maximum HP and the Claw Talisman because once again, those jumping attacks do very high damage. As for the stats, going to have 60 Vigor, and it's pretty much the rest of your points that is going to be put into Faith because we're going to have a Flame Art Infusion, which gives you a B scaling in Faith, so best just going all into that. And if you have 80 Faith, you probably can use a bunch of spells and do a decent damage that way. I'm not going to really be reusing much. I'm just going to be using Lightning Speed as to have a projectile option because obviously this build doesn't really have range potential. I'm going to have Golden Vow and then Flaming Range Strength, obviously, to just boost your damage itself. As for the level 80 variant, you're just going to have 40 Vigor and then the rest of the points put into Faith once again. At number 3, we are going to have a Power Stance Straight Sword build. Now, Power Stance Straight Swords, once again, have an amazing moveset. Any type of Power Stance combo that hits at the exact same time is going to be very, very good. But in this build in particular, we're going to have the Regalia of Ochad, which is a very solid arcane weapon that doesn't really get any status effects, but it has a very high damaging Ash of War, which we actually are going to spec into. And in our offhand, we're going to have the Lord Sworn Straight Sword with an Occult Infusion and have Poisonous Mist equipped onto it. Now, the Lord Sworn Straight Sword has very decent range, gets some of the highest base damage out of all the other straight swords, and it actually does get 110 crit multiplier as well, which is not going to really use much, but it's a nice benefit, I suppose. But the reason we're actually going to go into poison is because when you actually proc poison with this build, we're going to have the Mushroom Crown and the Kindred of Raw Exaltation Talisman, and when these things actually get procced, we actually do a whole bunch more damage, about 20% more damage, and they do stack as well. It does last about 20 seconds also, and in that time, we could actually use our high damaging Ash War and probably just melt a whole bunch of enemies. But alongside with this Power Sensing Straight Sword, you can hit very quickly, and with the Thorny Crack tier and the Millicent Prosthesis, you're going to get a whole bunch of damage very quickly, and then you can use the Ash of War while you have these buffs active, and then probably end up doing more damage to something like the Marius Executioner Sword, which is obviously going to be very beneficial because it's obviously just a straight sword. As for the stats, though, we're going to have 60 Vigor, 25 Endurance for that equipment load, and we're going to have just 18 and 12 Strength just to meet the minimum requirements for the Regalia, and just put the rest of your points into Arcane, essentially. Probably have 15 Faith as well, because with that 80 Arcane and 15 Faith, and using the Dragon Communion Seal, we're going to get a whole bunch of Incan scaling. Now, I do have a couple of spells I'm going to be using. Going to have Catch Flame and Lightning Spear. Not going to really use them much, but they're just like a nice spell option because you are going to have a bunch of damage with these things. Going to have Golden Vow and Flame Growing Strength as our weapon buffs as well. Now, with this 15 Faith, we are going to have the Faith tier to give us a plus 10 to Faith. So when we actually get that 25 Faith, we can meet the minimum requirements for Golden Vow and Lightning Spear. Now, as for our level 80 build, we're just going to have 40 Vigor, meet the minimum requirements for the Regalia, have 20 Endurance, the 15 Faith once again, and just put the rest of the points into Arcane, essentially. But yeah, it's going to be a very solid build. All you got to do is just lead off for the Lord Swan, hit the Poisonous Mist, poison the enemy, hit them a couple times with a light attack, and then switch to the Ash of War. At number 2, we have a Great Axe Power Stancing build. Now, Great Axes have been buffed plenty of times with their movesets to where they're a lot faster now, especially with those running and heavy attacks. But Power Stance, they still have a very solid moveset because they hit at the exact same time. And as for our weapons of choosing, we're going to have the Rusted Anchor and the Pickaxe, which both of these weapons do piercing damage, which obviously is very, very nice. But as for the Pickaxe, it actually is a Great Hammer, but it has a unique interaction to where it actually can be Power Stance with Great Axes. Cannot be Power Stance with Great Hammers. I don't really know why, but it is what it is. But the reason you're actually going to go with the Pickaxe instead of actually using 2 Rusted Anchors is because we're going to get 1 Rusted Anchor per playthrough, and the Pickaxe does actually get more stance damage, so we're actually going to go into that as well, because with that Pickaxe, we're going to have Cragblade infused onto it with a heavy infusion. And what Cragblade does is actually boost our poise damage by 10%, and actually adds more physical damage as well. As for our Rusted Anchor, we're just going to have Royal Knight Resolve infused onto it, because we're going to be just buffing our weapons and just spamming a whole bunch of jumping attacks, because these things get very high motion values with their jumping attacks themselves. And obviously, when playing into that, we're going to have the Raptor Black Feathers Mist, chest piece, the Raptor Black Feathers chest piece, and the Claw Talisman, because both of these are actually going to stack with one another and actually boost your jumping attack damage. Other talismans we're going to be using is the Great Jar's Arsenal to boost our equipment load, because both of these weapons are going to be very heavy, so we're actually going to need a bunch more equipment load, so we can actually have some type of poise to get some hyper armor alongside of these animations themselves. Going to have the Ritual Soul Talisman, which you probably don't really need to use. I'll probably just use something else if you actually really wanted to. I'm just going to have that one on for just more damage. And the Spear Talisman actually does boost your piercing counterattack damage, which both these weapons are piercing type, so they are going to benefit in that regard as well. As for our stats, going to have 60 Vigor and 30 Endurance, because obviously you're going to need a lot of equipment load, and just pretty much put the rest of your points into Strength itself. We're going to have 15 Faith, because once again, you're going to have the Faith tier to give us plus 10 to Faith, so we can actually wield things like Golden Vow, actually use things like Golden Vow spell, and probably the Lightning Incantation or Lightning Spear Incantation itself, because we're going to be using the Claw Mark Seal, which I don't actually have equipped on, but the Claw Mark Seal is going to be very beneficial as well. As for the level 80 build, we're just going to have 40 Vigor, 20 Endurance, and just put the rest of your points into Strength. Now, with 20 Endurance, you're probably not going to really get away with much in terms of actually, Power Stancing maybe, and not have much armor on. But yeah, it's probably going to be more of like a mid to late game type of build itself, but it's still going to be very solid in terms of just getting a whole bunch of damage out there. At number 1, we are going to have a Power Stancing Spear build. Now, Power Stancing Spears are amazing because they're insanely quick, have a lot of range, and do a lot of damage. Now, we are going to be using 2 Cross Naginatas, and Cross Naginatas are really amazing because they do have a unique light attack combo, one-handed, and they do actually get a lot of range and bleed. Now, you can only get 1 per playthrough, so another alternative is going to be using the Spiked Spear. You can just probably throw that one in your offhand. It's not going to have as much range nor as much damage. It actually does do strike damage, which is actually somewhat unique to the spears themselves. As for the options and actually what we're going to have infused onto them, both of them are going to be occult infused, and we actually are going to have Spectral Lance onto our main one. Now, Spectral Lance is going to be a decent projectile option, does actually go relatively far, actually does do decent poise damage. In our offhand, we're going to actually have Seppuku, because Seppuku does actually add more bleed to our weapon, and it actually does proc bleed onto ourselves, which does proc the buffs of both the White Mask and the Lord of Blood Exaltation Talisman, which is going to give us 20% more damage for the next 20 seconds, and both of those will actually stack with one another. Now, as for the talismans, or the rest of them, we're going to have the Spirit Talisman to boost our counterattack damage, the Great Jar's Arsenal to give us more equipment load, to give us more poise with our armor. Going to have the Millicent Prosthesis, which does give us plus 5 to dexterity and boost our damage with successive attacks. As for our stats, going to have 60 Vigor, 25 endurance for more equipment load and more stamina because the spear's power stance do take up a lot of stamina when using those attacks. Gonna have the 15 faith and gonna have 74 arcane. So pretty much put the rest of your points into arcane essentially. Because once again, gonna have the faith tier because when we actually use the faith tier, it's gonna give us the 25 faith. So we can use the gold of our spell and actually use flame giving strength. Once again, actually should be using the Dragon Communion Seal, but I have the Finger Seal equipped for whatever reason. You can be using certain types of spells as well. Now, as for the level 80 build, it's going to be a little different because you're not really going to benefit much of going into Occult Infusion and actually like leveling up your Arcane because you're not going to get much blood loss build up that way. Because at lower levels, it's going to be pretty low in terms of the blood loss build-up. So you're actually better off just leaving it as it is. Probably going into like a dexterity infusion, which actually scales with. Probably leveling up your dexterity, as you can probably see on the screen right now. 40 vigor, and it's putting up the rest of the points into dexterity. And probably actually using a buff like Blood Flame Blade as well. It's going to be very beneficial. Hence why I probably went into 10 Arcane as well. Because that's the minimum requirements you need for Blood Flame Blade. So that's probably like a decent option. This type of build is probably better for like later game, which you actually do get later levels and probably be able to like level up to your like 60 Arcane. But yeah, this build itself is just going to be insane. Just spam a bunch of running attacks because you're just going to hit very far, hit very hard, do a bunch of blood loss build up as well. So yeah, pretty solid build. But yeah, that pretty much concludes it for this one. As always, please do like and subscribe. And do let me know down below what type of top 5 build you would actually like to see next. I've already made like almost every single one that there actually is. But yeah, never hurts to ask. Anyway, please do follow me on Twitch as well because I should be live by the time this video is out. Anyway, see you next one, guys. Bye.